Hello everybody, how you doing? Let me move OBS out of the way. Welcome to SketchCraft Live! Speed Paint, Voldemort. Joining me to talk about this tonight is Brandon, Breathing Heavy James. Say hello.
Hi guys.
Oh, that's amazing. Veracusa James. For all those In Living Color fans out there, let's move right along. So what you see here is the Voldemort Copic sketch that I did, Copic and color pencil. I call it Suave style sketch. I did recently live right here on YouTube. Can you believe it? We did that. And now we're going to show you a speed video, time-lapse video. I don't know, it'll probably take a few minutes. And we'll do a little audio commentary over this. You interested in watching that, Brandon?
Sure am.
Right. So we'll go over here. Got the video. Cue it up. I'm going to go ahead and just hit play. So that's the line art right there, and we'll start. So this is sped up 12 times, folks. I think I did this in like 4 hours, somewhere around there. Don't quote me on this. This one took a little extra time because of the background. But basically, I drew the line art separately, and then I print them out. And in this case, I re-inked them using waterproof ink. But now I'm just printing them straight out using tinted lines because with the Copics, the waterproof ink wasn't holding up as well as it does when I watercolor over it because they're alcohol based. So lesson learned.
So would it smear?
Yeah, you can kind of see it on his face right there. Eventually, it all blends in. So it's kind of irrelevant, but I just don't like looking at that. And if it saves me a step, great.
Right.
So what I'm doing first is I'm blocking in the basic shades for all this stuff according to a lighting guide that I used in the pencils. And if you go look up the pencils, you can see like I shade it. And the reason why I shade the pencils is not to use the shade in my line arts now. It's just to use it as a guide for the lighting in the final piece. And this was a little tricky because he needs to have, like, I want to give him like zombie skin, but then his coat is also an emerald green, and then his clothes are like a different kind of like, he has like 3 different kinds of greens. So I was trying to balance it between like olive green, teal greens, shaded, this right here where you got these little like teals with a little bit of aquas, and then we'll shade into the darks as well. So it's a lot of subtle greenage. Greenage? That's the word.
Sounds about right.
So Brandon, you have any questions about this process or anything you want to bring up?
How long do you spend ahead of time just kind of figuring out that you wanted to use all these greens? Like, I know you do it on a separate warm-up paper, but how long do you usually take to do a warm-up coloring?
Well, it used to take me an hour. Now that I have 64 set colors and I have no choice what I'm going to do, like I have these kinds of greens, that's it. It's getting done like in 15-10 minutes. Because any of the blends that don't, like, you can see a lot of these harder edge blends right here. I'm not going to blend these with markers. I'm going to blend them with color pencil. So I can move right on. I already know I have aquas, I have yellow greens, and I have olive greens. So I'm just going to use that stuff, you know. So I'm more interested in just what that looks like, you know, versus you know, which ones I'm going to use. Just will those look good next to one another, or will he have to just be 2 sets of green and that's it, you know?
Right.
So not as long. So it's actually shortened the prep time considerably because I have fewer choices.
Right. So you're forcing yourself to make quicker decisions, basically.
Good paintings are done with fewer colors, folks. I know that sounds crazy, but it's actually true.
Because they use good contrast of the colors they have.
That's when you got to focus on lighting. Yeah, it's the big difference. Otherwise, you end up like those poster paint guys at the pier selling just, you know, smudges of hot color pinks and shit. You know, 4 colors. You need contrast to tie all that together, give it mood. So here, that's why I'm using the C7 there, right there to start. Now, something I want to add too about blacks. You don't. That's a C10. Oh, sorry, a warm 7 and a warm 10. So you don't actually have to use black on your art while you're Copicing. I tend to not use it. I save the blacks if I really need it for actual ink. Sometimes I use the 100% black marker, but I do a lot of the blacks now with Prismacolor pencil because they don't stick. They're not sticky. Those Copic markers can stick to your hand and then you
Like
smudge.
tar.
Yeah, they smudge your fucking. You know, you ever set it down on a nice, pretty bright spot and just regret
Oh yeah.
life?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And then you gotta try to dab it, touch it up, and go over it with some white out. And
Now this final drawing is 8.5 by 11, so some of the construction, like on this snake, sucks. But you know, like whatever. I should have fixed it, but sometimes you're just like, it's just a fucking sketch. Like if I were to do a big version of this, this would just be the concept, you know?
hmm
I was really more concerned about getting wand glow. You see me adding a little bit of like this neon yellow over here, because I'm like, how am I gonna get this wand to feel like it's glowing on
right.
top of the background? Like, I don't know, man. Like, I was just very concerned about the lighting on this piece. Like, am I actually gonna be able to do this?
Yeah, and he's mostly seen in darker areas anyway, so you don't really ever get a clear view of him. Like it's mostly coat and his face and the wand.
And I wanted a more animated feel to him, anyhow.
Mm.
I'll say this: the way I'm coloring before my Copics, I used to do a shade layer, print it out, and then color with shades already on the image. Now I'm doing it more like I would watercolor, where it's a base color, you know, and then shade thrown on top. Now, normally when you add these grays onto colored Copics, they can actually wash out. You ever seen that, Brandon? They have like this haziness
Yeah.
and a textured feel. You can get rid of that using color pencil, which I'll do. So you can use color pencil to fill in those little texture gaps and blend out and put color. You can actually put color back into those grays. A little bit of teal, a little bit of smaller fluctuations that I don't know if always resonate, if they come through on the screen, you know, but on the final piece, you've seen the difference, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
even these little ones are pretty intense in terms of color, you know?
hmm
So,
Yeah, I
but,
think that's the only problem sometimes when I used to color that I would wash out some of the colors when I try to mix the grays and it just gets this whole hazy I don't know, it just didn't look right. It didn't have the vibrancy. It just all lost it. And it just I went over it too many times.
yeah, you can add that back with color pencil. Now, this background, I decided to do it a different way. So I'm using a caramel YR14 and a burnt sienna. That's the burnt sienna right there.
hmm
And I'm coloring the whole thing in those, similar to how you would do a painting where you do an underpainting in siennas. I've been studying that, you know, like painters, they do the whole piece actually in like a sienna lighting scheme and then let it dry and then paint on top in opaque media like acrylics and oils.
hmm
So my idea here was to try that with this to get that whole bottom piece because I knew that was going to be all tinted, but I was like, I don't know. I wanted it underneath. You could see like I did a little small tiny sketch in my airship notebook, which that video is up on the sketches at midnight, folks. If you want to see, you can see this sucker here in the airship notebook. So it's got that same feel. And you could technically do that across the whole piece, but I didn't really want to experiment on this. You know, after one or two experiments on a piece, you're like, I'm losing money to continue this, so
Right.
I gotta like, I gotta move on and experiment on another piece sometime. You know, it's basically the idea.
Any rhyme or reason why you colored the rocks and then colored the other leg instead of coloring both legs at the same time?
Boredom.
Just mixing it up so you're not
Yeah, just
like on
bored.
one thing.
Just bored.
Alright.
You know. Never underestimate the power of being stuck there for hours. You know.
Yeah.
And usually, like whatever's my hand's not gonna block. You know.
hmm
I'm like, what to do next? I want it to be done. I really want a done marker, like a marker that just does shit for you.
Just finishes it.
Yeah, that'd be nice. It's harder too because the background's white, and so things look a little different. You know, they look
hmm
a little darker than they actually are, and things like that. So, and with this his snake, I'm just like trying to use the felt tips to get some motion. Like I'm trying to streak, you know, the shading too.
Uh-huh.
And I'm trying to flick it so it looks like it's kind of, you know, doing that snake thing.
Right. Slithering around.
Yeah, slithering. Alrighty. And this whole time you were doing flats.
Yeah.
This whole time. You haven't been on any stream in the last month.
I have not. I've been very absent working on the flats for all this great art that people demand.
Or you just work slow. I gotta
Yes.
get you
Yes.
using shortcut keys.
How long did you say this whole piece took you?
Like 4 hours, something like that. Maybe 5. Somewhere around there.
If this was like 11 by 14, how long do you think it would take? 6, 7?
Yeah.
That, give or take.
Yeah.
Just that extra couple.
There's always more detail, beyond just
Mhm.
the coverage. So there'd be 3 inches, or the proportionate equivalent. Now that it hasn't ended, folks. I've just merged streams together, so we're gonna just give it a second. Here we go. I don't have time to edit this shit out. Like, I just download the streams, speed them up, and we do this. We do it live. So now I'm gonna do the background here using distress inks. If you want to know my distress ink process, I made a nice video how to do distress ink backgrounds, BGs, and the art tips. But you can see here, I'm doing a burst style technique where it's like bursting, right? Like it's shh. So I'm using the edge of these little stamp pads I made. I made my own custom stamp pads, and I'm using the edge to, just straight edge, yo, to create those little bursts. And so I got the peacock feathers in one color, and then this next one's citrus or whatever, nitrous, one of those things. It's like a really lime green, which you do not currently have, Brendan, because that's the second case worth of inks you're gonna have to buy on your own.
One day.
Yeah, soon. So the thing with the distress inks isn't to actually get all of the detail with the distress inks. It's to get the coverage and then let it dry, and you can use color pencil to get the rest. It's not that much ink actually sitting on the page because the foam, it's using very little. It's just that it's very saturated. And you can see it just quickly changes the whole temperature of the piece, So this is Salty Ocean, which is just like a B05 equivalency of the Copic marker, to add some shade here. Not to throw shade, just to add some. Ha ha ha. Ha ha. For all the inner city kids. Yay. Oh shit.
Yeah,
That didn't sound right. You know what I mean, folks.
Rob keeps it hood. Yeah, I mean the stamps are cool, not just because they just do a lot of coverage, but they add a real, I don't want to say airbrush look, but it just adds a really nice blend in areas that you might not get with single strokes from the marker. It just covers a nice broader space that it just gives it that more dramatic lighting and focus to a piece.
If this didn't work out, I'd be airbrushing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Put it that way. So
right.
This negates the need for airbrush. Now I'm using the actual black soot, which is a black. You got to be very careful using this to carve out that focal point.
Right. You could ruin a piece real quick with that.
Oh, believe me, I'm very aware. My hands are actually not touching the paper. I'm like latched on almost like a face hugger, but not just with the tips, right? Like my fingers.
Just the tip.
Yeah, just the tip. Very cute, Brandon. Thank you. Class.
High class here at SketchCraft.
Yeah. Thank you, Brandon. I'm trying. It did dry a little bit before I did the color over that black, because then you'll be careful about tinting your stamp pads. You can't get them back if you start mixing colors, or if you use that stamp on the wrong distress pad, it's done. So now I'm using color pencil. I primarily use polychromos. I bought the 36 set, whatever, and then I filled it in with an extra 10, 12 of my own extra colors I have, based on need. So these days I use all my really bright yellows. I actually don't use the markers for those. I use them exclusively with color pencil. So when I was saying before, I might have to update that Copic marker video because I have 2 light yellow slots that I don't know if I'll ever use. So you can see when I take the yellow and I color into the bursts, you get that extra intensity, And then in the shade, it'll texture and kind of blend out once the distress ink dries. Then you can get more value along with hue back in with the color pencil because it's opaque. And I could throw color into that by using aquas and teals. And I'm not pressing hard with my fingers, folks. You don't want to give yourself carpal tunnel or, knuckle fatigue. Break your fucking... But these things are nice. The polychromos, they don't break, right, Brandon? Like when you sharpen them and shit?
They're really strong, and
unlike the Prismacolors, yeah. Just break every 3 seconds.
Oh, the Prisma, if you barely touch the paper, just snap, snap.
Yeah. I'm also taking a more saturated version of the color. Like, say I want green, and I have like a dark blue shadow next to it. I'll take a real saturated green and halo that edge. Because right into the darkest points of shade, you get intense saturation. If you really study lighting,
Mm-hmm.
So that adds an extra... It's almost like a bloom-like effect. That over the course of the piece, right? Over the course of here, it all adds up to the final image. Something to note too, these it's a transparent medium, so it gets brighter depending on the lighting in your room. You know what I mean? It can get darker depending on the lighting in your room too.
Right, now the light bounces off it.
Right.
How long did the background take you?
30 minutes tops.
Oh, okay.
It's very fast. Like the color pencils take more time than distress pads. The only trick with the distress ink is that you got to make sure you don't scrunch the paper. Because
right.
it can work your arm out if you're a wuss, like if you're just an artist and you're not working out all the time. You can be like, oh, my shoulder, and then you're like, I need to work out more because that should not hurt. So, but it can get a little repetitive on the shoulder. Now I'm taking like the yellow. You see, I'm covering my hand because I don't want to.
Right.
And I'm haloing the edges of him with that yellow, saturated yellow, which gives a nice little bloom-like effect. And those are my little sketches I do when I'm bored. Just crazy angry guy. Like someone peed in my Cheerios. Urgh!
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Now I'm like, this is so awesome. I wish I could just keep working on this forever and just keep getting paid to do the one piece.
Right. Once it all starts to look good.
And now I'm adding different kinds of browns and reds into the rocks. Which, is intentionally warm right there compared to the coolness to make you look in the center of the image, And then
So
you look down. You look down, then you look up, and you're like, "Rise, Lord Voldemort!" Right? Like that's the idea. That's the really retarded way of me, like, I'll look at that, and then I'll look up. Oh wow!
I get it.
Yeah.
He's about to make some epic speech at the top.
And I'm throwing some of that aqua teal color into the shade as well. Little blues, little greens. Something to note too, these color pencils can smudge after a while, especially once you got them all on the paper. So when you're done, you want to apply some varnish. I get the Prismacolor high gloss, and I take it outside, and I do it like this, and let this mist sort of fall on it. Let it dry for 10 minutes, and do a second coat, and that gives it an extra little bit of gloss, and then protects it. So once it's sealed, you can't. You gotta do that. You gotta do that shit last. Like,
so make sure you're done. Don't just finish it and rush to do that. Give yourself a little time to walk away from the piece, come back, look at it, and then decide whether you're done or not.
I'm waiting for the day people expect me to do this whole process at con. I mean, I can in my room, but not. I mean, not 4 hours per piece.
Right.
So, at con things get far less complex. Very simple character, and I do like 3 or 4 poses, unless Brandon takes a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, throws off my whole rhythm.
I like to, once or twice per con. And this is you just going back, adding a little more because you just weren't too sure about it.
Well, then I didn't work on that side. I only worked on the left.
Ah.
I got real tired after I did the left side, and I'm like, I'll just do that other side as I get to it. Give my knuckles a rest. Yeah, that's where I'm like, see, That's what I'm doing. I'm explaining that to people. Which further proves the point that if I had just stopped right here, most people wouldn't care.
Right.
But no, I got to keep going. So, yay, Rob.
Rob cares.
Now I'm throwing color over the snake to push him atmospherically into the background. So Voldemort pops forward. Which you can't do with Copic markers. You can't add atmospherics with a marker tip. Like, you just
Right.
can't. That's why they have that marker, that airbrush, Copic airbrush thing. I've tried that shit. All it does is deplete all your fucking
Ink.
ink. Yeah, so 3 parts here. Here we go. So I did that background separately, and then now I'm going to come in and work on shadows. Look at that. You can see me using that Prismacolor pencil. This part's fun, actually.
This part you enjoy.
Yeah, it's fun. You get to pop shapes out. It's all done. Can act like a big shot. Everyone sees this image on the stream, and they all think, "Oh my god, that's amazing!" You know, no one has to wonder what it's going to look like. Just get praised. You know, like feed me, feed the ego. It's this and the white highlights. So
Yeah. Which I think are a lot of people's favorite part because it's the little finishing touches.
it's not my favorite part.
Why
You could
not?
fuck up a whole piece. You know,
I
spill a whole
have.
bottle of white ink all over your shit right at the very end.
I haven't done that yet.
It'll happen statistically.
Yeah, I say yet. I mean,
See, I'm trying to add the shadow too, like a little cast shadow right there. But
Mhm.
I sharpen that little black pencil and I'm able to go in and add extra details. It's like, I'm trying to add that snake texture that's on. He's got this diamond texture, the snake. Which is hard to see in the movie stills, but I didn't add it in my initial drawing and some fucking dickweed was like, "You gotta add the fucking texture." I'm like, "Oh, really?" You know? Hey, Leon, how you doing? You gotta constantly, when you're doing little details like that, you gotta keep the Prismacolor really well sharpened. And then I'm edging out those little blacks with the teal. Do. Fun to watch. I wish I got this done this fast. That's what every artist
right.
says. I wish I could just. Now I'm adding this nice bold outline. Now this is not because. So this is just because it is a graphic piece of art, you know,
Hmm.
and it needs to sit on. It's going to sit on your shelf or maybe on a picture frame somewhere. So I didn't want to pop it out. So I had to move to the brush tip edge because there's so much wax on the page that the
The
Sharpie
pen
pen.
tip.
Yeah, and I wasn't wearing my hat right here, so you get to see a bit of my thinning hair. We're gonna be
Bonus
bald craft here in
features.
a few years, Brandon. You
I
between you and
know.
me, right?
It's all that awesomeness in our brain just killing all the hair.
Yeah. Or a poor diet.
Yeah, give or take.
Now, here I'm painting in these highlights. After a while, I try to only use the white highlight paint now for really big areas of white highlight, but little tiny things, you'll see me just flip to the jelly pen. Because the drawings are so small, you know,
Hmm.
you just get better details with the jelly pen for that sort of thing. Oh, it's a little off camera. Hard to keep track of the camera too while I'm doing this. I always look
Yeah.
back up and I'm like, oh shit, am I on? Are they seeing this? Added a little bit of white around the wand. Right there.
Gives it a nice little glow. What size brush is that? A 2?
That's a one liner.
Ah.
Kyle, we starting a bald club. Saitama. It's because we're so powerful, we just lose our hair. 100 push-ups, 100 crushes, 10 miles a day. And the white ink that I use now is I use Dr. Martin's white ink, and there's bleed proof. Bleed proof is more of a thick acrylic or gouache kind of, and the ink is it's more like the white acrylic ink I used before. I switched over just because the Dr. Martens is a little bit more opaque than the whatever. But sometimes when be honest, if I'm just too lazy to grab and I have the easier access to the white calligraphy ink, I'll just use that. It doesn't really matter. They all dry the same.
Right.
That was me showing people the line arts for the Kill La Kill. Yeah, see, I kind of fucked that line up, so I have to go in there and paint over it. But see, that's what I was telling people. You can always paint over the stuff once it dries. Put a little Copic marker on it. Once that dries, add the color pencil. You can paint over shit. It's totally possible. And now I'm going to use this little jelly pen now, these little speckles on the snakeskin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to kind of show scales or give a feeling of scaliness.
You're quite the wordsmith.
Well, I do type while looking at the keyboard, so. Tons of these little speck dots. And you can't, it's hard to do those little dots with the brush tip, by the way, folks. I've tried. So, Brandon, you have any questions?
Yeah.
As we near the end here, we're going to be done in a few seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say about the gel pen that you used. Didn't you tell me there's a certain kind you like to use?
I just use a Sakura Jelly Roll. You got a Sakura Souffle, which is a cheaper version. So get the Jelly Roll.
Okay.
Yeah. The Souffle has a yellowing. I don't know. I don't like it. I used yours for 3 seconds. I'm like, nope. And I gave you one of mine. Done. And that's that, right? Yeah, that's that. Let's see. I signed it. And we'll look at the high res here in a second. Or the higher res.
Right.
So this is an actual photograph of the final piece, which I've already shipped to the backer. So.
And I assume they're loving it.
I don't know. Not everyone gets back to me, once I send the stuff out. But you see I added a little like wand, little ding little glitter pieces. I added the yellow Copic. Actually, it's marker right around them. No, it's color pencil actually. So even I have a hard time remembering all the little glitters. So Copic pencil. I'm sorry, Copic pencil. Copic pencil. Copic marker and Polychromos color pencils. Anything else, Brandon?
Nope.
All right, folks, that's it for Voldemort Speed Paint. We're going to be back on in a minute, and we're going to do one more Speed Paint commentary, Wolverine Saucy. We'll talk about that.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Keep on breathing, Brandon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Brandon breathes.